everybody. Welcome to Ntwc Plus. This is season 6, episode 2 of this. We started doing this back in 2020 when we couldn't do the Ntwc, the National Tropical Weather Conference, live because, well, you know why. And so we had to come up with another way to do it. So we did it this way, and we've been doing it ever since. And of course, we still do the conference live now that we're allowed to. But we've been doing this now this is our 6th season. 2nd episode. Here we are in the 2nd week of hurricane season. No tropical update today because it's so quiet. We've got a great show for you today. I think this is going to be a fascinating day. I was going to call it a gaggle of meteorologists, but there's got to be a better word for that. I looked at maybe an eye wall of experts or something. I don't know. We'll come up with something. But we got a great group for you today. Rob Perillo, Franklin, Michael Lowry, all here. Bill Reed is here, as always. We'll get to him in a second. But Hal is back. Hurricane Hal wasn't here last week and is again this week. So let me start by saying good morning to you, Hal. How's it going out there?
Hey, good morning, Tim. Great to see everyone. It's a beautiful day on the island, rather humid. Got some rain in the region, but great to be back on the island and great to be here at Ntwc Plus.
Where have you been the last 6 months? What have you been doing?
Man, traveling around. I actually did a lot of severe thunderstorm field work. I drove over 6,000 miles going into hail cores, and then just a lot of conferences this year, just preparing for severe weather and the upcoming hurricane season as well.
You've been a busy guy. We're glad to have you back in the saddle there in Galveston, and welcome back to the fun. Good to have you, Hal.
Thanks so much.
And of course, Bill Reed, director of the Hurricane Center. Bill, we didn't talk much about what your off season was like last week. What did you do during the last 6 months? Where have you been?
Well, let's see. 6 months ago, the end of the season, I was boarding a small cruise ship in Malaga, Spain, and given 6 lectures as we came across to the Caribbean. That was fun.
That's a long time to see.
Been off to our New Mexico place several times, and of course, the always anticipated conference down on South Padre.
Well, we're glad to have you back on here with us today. We appreciate a lot going on. And before we get to the program, let's thank our sponsors, and then we'll get this thing started. The folks who make this possible each week and have for many, many years. USAA, my goodness, we could not do this without you, USAA. So thank you so much for being part of everything we do at the National Tropical Weather Conference, Ntwc Plus, and of course the Storm Science Network. We appreciate you guys. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the host for the National Tropical Weather Conference every year on South Padre Island. If you haven't been there yet, you should join us next April. We'll be there once again at the beautiful Marriott Courtyard Hotel. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, Live View. All folks who make these a possibility. Okay, big show. Let's get back to, Bill first, and we'll get the party started with our introductions of today's eye wall of experts, and we'll go from there. Bill, take it away.
Sure. I get the privilege of introducing Michael Lowry. I've known Michael since about when I showed up at the Hurricane Center. We had him for a while in our storm surge unit there. He's currently a hurricane specialist at WPLG Local 10 in Miami. I believe that's the same station that Max Mayfield probably started that initiative when he retired from the Hurricane Center. It's a very good fit down there, having something like that. We'll talk about that as time goes on. He spent time with FEMA, and he also spent time with the Weather Channel, and he's a local he's from Florida, spent time in Louisiana. He's familiar with the vast amount of stuff on hurricanes. So I look forward to talking to Michael. Hal, I'll pass the baton to you for the other shows.
For sure. I'm so excited to introduce Chris Franklin. Chris is the chief meteorologist at WWL-TV in New Orleans, bringing nearly 2 decades of weather expertise to viewers across Southeast Louisiana. A native of the region, Chris earned his degree in meteorology from Mississippi State University and began his career with the National Weather Service before moving back into broadcast meteorology. He's really known for his calm, clear, and engaging forecast. You'll notice that right away about Chris. And he's guided the community through hurricanes, floods, and everyday weather with accuracy and empathy. His deep knowledge for Gulf Coast weather patterns and passion for public safety make him a trusted source for critical life-saving information year-round down there in Metro New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana. I would also like to introduce Rob Perillo. Rob is the chief meteorologist at KATC TV3 in Lafayette, Louisiana, with over 30 years experience forecasting weather in Acadiana. He's a trusted voice in the region, and he's known for accurate science-based forecast and his calm presence during severe weather events, including hurricanes. Rob holds a degree in meteorology from Cornell University and is a certified broadcast meteorologist by the American Meteorological Society. Rob is passionate about educating the public on weather safety and often speaks at schools and community events. His dedication and expertise have made him a household name in South Louisiana weather coverage. Chris and Rob, welcome to NTWC Plus.
Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, I'm Oswego State, not Cornell, but I'll take Cornell as a master's.
Gotcha. You've been, I know you did a bunch of stuff up there in upstate New York. Great to have both you guys on the program today.
Thanks.
All right, Bill, open it up.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons you guys were brought on is you've been under the gun with the most activity of anywhere in the continental U.S. over the last coming up on 8 years. And I think the first thing I'd like to know is coming into this season, what role do you think, or how much do you think hurricane fatigue plays on not only your citizenry, but your staff, yourselves, as we wind into this season? So throw it to you first, Rob.
Well, I would say hurricane fatigue is already setting in by people posting 380-hour GFS models and getting folks already is this real? Blah, 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 blah. And that is fighting the social disinformation is the first part of the hurricane season, apparently now. And that will go on until we actually have storms developing.
Yeah. How about you, Chris? Similar thinking in New Orleans?
Very similar. It's a now almost half of our job is quelling these fears of these sensationalized posts. I mean, a good part of we were talking off camera a bit ago about our hurricane specials that we do annually. Right. And a big part of it is now fighting the disinformation, misinformation of social media. And it kind of being a double-edged sword. It has its great attributes, but also can really be a harm and a hindrance during hurricane season. And so, we're fighting this information of do I even address these sensationalized posts? But they're getting a lot of attention. So we kind of go back and forth between the Weather Center and the news management of, is this something we should discuss, not to discuss? And it usually ends up being, we'll mention it and kind of explain why certain models do these things early on, and maybe use these as learning moments, teachable moments, where we can kind of explain why you don't look that far into the future with tropical genesis, and kind of use that as a lesson as to maybe stop folks following some of these sensationalized social media posts. So I would think kind of building into the season, there may already be a little bit of fatigue, but at least along the Gulf Coast and for Southeast Louisiana, we had, Francine last year. We had a little bit of a lull after what had been a very active couple of years. And so I think there may be a little bit of fatigue going into the season, but I think each season is very different.
Yeah, thinking of that. Now, if Michael, you have the opposite.
Don't jinx it, Bill. Don't jinx it.
So, do you feel like the citizenry there and maybe some of your staff even have a bit of hurricane complacency, or is all the social media and other media coverage of all things tropical kind of keep people on edge?
I think the storms of the recent seasons, because they were so close, there were close calls. There were areas that people in Southeast Florida are familiar with. You go over to Fort Myers, that was hit pretty hard, and then of course Tampa, and even up into the Big Bend of Florida. I think it's keeping people on their toes. I don't get the sense of a complacency from folks here. I completely agree with Rob and Chris about where we are in the world of models and the misinformation that gets kind of sent everywhere. And, our job as a trusted messenger is to sort of keep that balance. And it's interesting now, having done this for so many hurricane seasons, you can sort of see the ebbs and flows the emotions throughout the season. And early on, you sort of have to keep them calm. It's June. Not to say that we can't get big storms in June, but let's remember that the big part of the season is August, September, and October. And oftentimes by the time we get there, people are exhausted. We've been, they've been seeing model runs after model runs that didn't actually come to fruition. But then you want them to pay attention. And so it's bringing them back to, hey, this is the important time of year when you really do need to take these models very seriously. Not that you shouldn't at all, points of the year, but when you're looking out 7, 8, 9, 10 days, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I don't. Just a one little observation from the point of view of the people I keep in touch with on social media. I'm kind of surprised that the people I know that know what I'm in that are, in my opinion, wisely, aren't paying any attention at all to the. They've taken heeded the advices. Take your trusted forecaster in the media, and for the official forecast, the NHC forecast, and that seems to be working pretty well with at least the people I know.
One of the things I see at the beginning of the season too is when the hurricane seasonal forecasts come out, right? And trying to give they're more important to us as meteorologists versus the general public, and really try to hone in on it just takes one storm, prepare every season equally, no matter what the forecast is. I remind him of 1992. Andrew came in late August. It was the A storm, and a busy season like 1995. We didn't have any U.S. hits, so you got to really kind of present the information and calmly and say, hey, we're just talking about be ready for the hurricane season. And people will come back and say, well, you forecast a busy season every season. And last year was a busier than normal season. It wasn't the blockbuster we thought it could be. But I look back, we had 8 tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico, 7 made landfall, 5 were hurricanes, and 2 were majors. So to me, that's a pretty darn busy season. But if it doesn't impact you, and people were complaining here locally, hey, you had a forecast of a busy season. We didn't have anything. Well, it's like, well, we had Hurricane Francine. Do you remember that one? That hit the Louisiana coast as a cat too. So unless it hits you directly, it's those seasonal forecasts are very informational for us in the insurance business. But for the general public, it's hard. You want to report it because it's the story of the day, but you also got to give it context.
Yeah, Hal and I have a little easier sell on there because of Alicia, 83. And I always pose it. Suppose I just forecast 4 storms and only 1 major hurricane out of the 4. Right. And it's going to make landfall somewhere. Are you going to prepare less for that season than, say, 2010 if I forecast 20 storms and 12 hurricanes?
Bill, I was just talking at a workshop yesterday, and I brought that up. I talked about 1983, 4 named storms, but one of them's a Cat 3 on Galveston Island, right? So that concept of whether it's a busy season or not, you have to be prepared.
I saw a headline yesterday in a major news outlet that said that the projections were for a particularly deadly hurricane season. And I mean, this was a very reputable news outlet otherwise. And you're always surprised. And you see that, a lot of folks, even within our legacy media misunderstand what we can actually forecast going into. If we could forecast where the deadly storms are going to happen, they wouldn't be deadly, I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm just amazed. I don't know how it's played out in your stations, but the way the forecasts were put out by the people that Phil in Colorado State and the NOAA ones, the wording was for a slightly more active than average season, and it just amazed me how almost every news outlet that I watched that dropped the word slightly. Mm-hmm. And that immediately adds to the hype of it.
It's not sensational
deadly. After the third derivative on the thing, you end up with deadly in there. And refer people back to the actual forecast.
I mean, I think it really speaks to how critical our roles are as scientists. To be present and to make sure that the information that's getting out there is right.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, I had a question. How, as a hurricane specialist at the station, how often are you part of the on air during this regularly scheduled news, or are you pretty much held in reserve for the big ones?
No, I'm on. You'll see me every day for the most part in during hurricane season, even when it's quiet. It's important that I'm on sort of regularly to establish that trust and that, build that relationship with our viewers and just remind people that hurricane season's happening and keep them interested in the season and not keeping them interested by making a mountain out of a molehill for every thunderstorm that we see across the tropics, but bringing in history and climatology and using that as an opportunity to teach viewers and to make them feel a little more empowered when there is a storm threat.
Yeah. Hal, you look like you got something on your mind there. What question? You got?
I actually want to go back to what we were talking about, disinformation. From you guys dealing with this a lot, in your opinion, is this mostly like misguided people just in the public? Do you ever see this coming from other like professional organizations, whether they're in meteorology, insurance, in disaster recovery? I mean, where are you seeing the disinformation generally coming from?
For me, social media, it's just coming that way from general public. I don't, most of the emergency preparedness people in the community here, they have a good beat on what's going on, and whether it's a busy season or not, they know they have to prepare equally and be prepared. And it'll be interesting to see how things play out in the future if, there's a lot of locals now jumping at the gun because of the way the money may be coming in from FEMA nationally. If there's some disaster in your area, they're scrambling to figure out how they're going to pay for things because the states may have to take on a 50-50 proposition now instead of 75% government, 25% local after a storm. So I think they're scrambling more about that than they are worried about numbers or what the forecast is.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say as far as the misinformation or even disinformation that we're seeing, it's primarily social media. And, the New Orleans market, the public are pretty weather savvy. We've gone through a number of storms just recently. And so they kind of know what to trust. But there are still folks that will ask me, hey, but I saw on the such and such page, they were posting this. What do you think? So it's still out there, and it still does cause a little bit of, I wouldn't even say public alarm, but maybe a slight sense of concern that we do find at WWL. We at least have to address these kind of sensationalized posts, especially when they're showing the GFS 14 days out, and it's a major hurricane in the middle of the Gulf, south of the Louisiana coast. It may not be the A block story of our weathercast, but it's at least in there as a mention. Or what we have found with WWL, we have a WWL Plus streaming channel, and we find that we can do far more in-depth weather tropical discussions where we have folks asking us in real time on Facebook questions that they want answers to at that moment. And so we've been doing a lot of the streaming with regards to weather and can really get into the weeds. And I can do a 20-minute tropical update on a day like today when there is nothing threatening, solely based on what models are showing or not showing, or just taking viewer questions and what they really want to know. As a matter of fact, we were off camera talking about our hurricane specials. We kind of did that this year where we asked the public, what do you want to see in a hurricane special? What do you want more information about? So we kind of let this become a little bit more public driven. And there was a lot of that questioning, what types of social media pages should I follow? And I said, well, you should follow us. You should follow the Hurricane Center. And that's about it. And aside from some of the other experts out there, be a little bit more picky in which pages for weather information you follow. Not Big Jim's weather sensational page. Maybe stay away from the one that you can't find who even hosts the page or where their degree is from.
Chris, I'm glad you brought up this concept of even doing daily updates. It sounds like a lot of that is really engagement from these questions you're getting, as well as maybe just overall education that you wanted to provide anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And there was a part of us that thought, well, if we do a daily tropical update when, the vast majority of the season is quiet, especially right now and in the Gulf Basin, but we kind of use that opportunity to answer questions that the public have. And sometimes, like right now, would be more general questions about hurricane season, hurricane forecasting. How far in advance can you see these? Why do you, what does a PTC mean? What is a wave? What is an invest? And so we kind of get into more of the generalized tropical terminology. And then as we get further and deeper into the season and there are things to actually focus on, we can kind of focus more on those. And with the ability to stream, there is an open-ended discussion. We can go as long or as short as we want. We are not time constrained with on-air and commercial breaks and covering up, national programming.
Wow.
I agree.
Are you getting a large audience on streaming?
It's amazing. Even when I think maybe we're doing a somewhat weather nerd, really in the weeds type discussion, we'll get thousands of eyeballs on it at that moment. And then for streaming, it lives on our app forever. And then we'll find people going back. When the National Hurricane Conference was in New Orleans this year, I did 8 just sit down 15 to 20 minute discussions with a number of folks, some parish local leaders here, someone from Operation Barbecue. We sat down with Dr. Klotzbach and others. And, it was very interesting to me. And I thought maybe it would only be of interest to those kind of in the weather know. But it ended up being the most popular show on our streaming site for that week. So it was taking over our normal newscasts in popularity. So there's obviously interest and kind of daily interest in these discussions.
Cool.
I was just going to piggyback on what Chris was saying. I couldn't agree with you more that there's this seemingly insatiable appetite for more, deeper information. I think that's why a lot of people are seeking out other sources on social media, because they almost feel like, when we get a minute and a half, 2 minutes for a weather cast, that we're not telling them something, or they're missing something, and they want more. They want more than that. And there are a number of ways of getting that information and giving that information. The line I think is important to that we try to walk is to not try to sensationalize something and to not make something more than what it actually is. But I do think like our role is, meteorologists as, experts in this field there's always an interesting story happening during hurricane season. It's to find that story and to bring it to people who want to hear about it. And, there's stuff going on with weather, even when there's no active hurricanes happening, with the science. And so I think these are opportunities throughout the hurricane season to bring people into the fold, rather than to say, hey, we're just going to sit this one out and, seek it out somewhere else, but provide more information, but obviously do that as responsibly as you can.
Okay. Rob, do you have a streaming component at your station?
Yeah, well, I pretty much hold off on doing any of the additional streaming until we're a week or 10 days out. Then it's kind of a daily routine. And what I do after the 6 o'clock newscast, I promise, hey, we're going to do a Facebook Live. We'll answer your questions, specific concerns. And it always turns out to, what's the weather going to be in Delco tomorrow? Everybody wants to know exactly when's the hurricane hitting my house or what factors. But it's we diss social media because of there are some false actors out there looking for clicks, but it's a great way to reach out in a respectful way, no matter if you're talking about chemtrails or you're talking about tropical systems. It's a great way to educate and allay some fears and talk about all the things we look for as meteorologists. What could go wrong with this forecast? What would we be on the lookout? How could things turn worse for us, or what would be better type thing? And I've tried to follow what Ed Piotrowski is doing, is giving these 3 different scenarios. Storm goes out to sea, storm comes inland, storms make a left turn, that sort of thing. So it's an opportunity to go through much more. And I'm lucky that I get minimally 345 for weather, but sometimes I ask for 5 or 6 6 or 7 when things start getting crazy and nobody pushes back. But even in a 6 or 7 minute weathercast, you cannot cover, you might be probably generating more questions than less. So that's way we got Facebook Live is probably the way to go for us. And we do digital as well. Try to go to .com and to the phone app. That's very important because we're seeing more and more people as the TV generation ages out. More and more people are getting their information straight from their phone, not from any other device or computer. They're getting it straight from their phone. So it's getting that information to the phone, whether it's radar updates or a full-blown tropical update, get it to the phone.
I hear you there. My grandkids, I don't think a single one of them could name anybody on broadcast TV. They do know about weather because of me, but they're doing it on the phone.
Unfortunately, I'm known just for memes. People know me from memes more than they know me from television.
Respectful memes, right?
Oh yeah, most of them are, and they're pretty darn funny too.
I think that's a compliment, Rob, really.
Yeah, there's a whole webpage out there that's like Rob Perillo, the man, the myth, or whatever, and somebody's got a fan page, and the images are quite funny. Some of them had to have been taken off as well.
I can imagine. An idle, devious mind is a terrible thing to waste, right?
Exactly.
I'm going to shift gears, but let's go to our halftime break now, Tim, with a sponsor thing, and then Hal on GeoTrek, and then I'll pose a couple of other different types of questions we can talk about.
Sure, let's do that. I've got some good questions coming up. I've got some, I don't know if they're good or not, but I've got questions coming up after the half-point break as well. But let's thank our sponsors once again who are here week in and week out to make these events a possibility. Couldn't do it without you guys. USAA, thank you for all you do. You know, USAA, when we started doing events for kids years ago with the Storm Science Network, got involved, said we want to be part of that, and they're also part of these events, and they're part of the National Tropical Weather Conference every year, and we sincerely appreciate what they do. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, we're on South Padre Island every year in the month of April, and the CVB shows up with the goodie bags and all the cool stuff to give away so that everybody on the island knows what to do while they're there. The Weather Company, a big part of broadcast meteorologist jobs all across the country. We appreciate them for being part of it. Weather Boy, you know, if you don't know what they do, look for Weather Boy online. This guy's everywhere, and he's at the National Tropical Weather Conference, and he sponsors college students to come to the program. He does 3 scholarships for college students studying meteorology anywhere in the continental U.S. or Hawaii. They enter a contest and they get flown to South Padre Island, and everything is taken care of by Weather Boy. And he also does some great cookies. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. So thanks to the Weather Boy for that. And Live View. Make sure that if you're a broadcast meteorologist and you're at the National Tropical Weather Conference, you can broadcast back to your home market. That doesn't cost you anything. And Live View is a big sponsor of that. So we appreciate them being part of this as well. All right, Hurricane Hal, GeoTrek. Your podcast is amazing. You ask the best questions. You get in with the most interesting people, and I just love hearing it. What have you got going on right now?
Tim, it's been fascinating. You know, with GeoTrek, we're exploring the world to tell stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. I think it's quite timely today, considering today's guests. Have you ever visited historic New Orleans, or maybe historic parts of Acadiana, or even you go to parts of Miami or Miami Beach, you're seeing these vintage places that have been around for 100+ years. Historic preservation has stood out as this really important thing in long-term communities, historic communities, to really preserve and tell the story of the character of the place. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of extreme weather and disasters threaten places that are historic. So recently on the GeoTrek podcast, we brought on Lisa Craig Hensley. She is an expert on historic preservation, but really working at that interface of climate resiliency and historic preservation. It was a fascinating discussion. We started by talking about her work in Annapolis, Maryland, a place that's seeing a lot more flooding in recent years. That's affecting the historic downtown and businesses. And then we went over to California. We talked about wildfires and extreme drought and how that's affecting things going on as well in California. I really got 3 things from the podcast with Lisa. Number 1, historic preservation is so important because it really defines the character of your town. What makes makes your town important. Number two, I really got the sense that Lisa thinks we need to take a common sense approach. Where possible, preserve those historic buildings, but we have to make adaptations. We may need to raise them in some areas. In fire-prone areas, we may need fireproof shingles that look like the historic ones that are not made out of wood. These common sense approaches can really preserve and save your historic community so it's not lost. And number three, the biggest thing I got from the podcast was the importance of community. Really working with community partners at the local level. It's so important for climate resiliency. And Lisa said in a few of these cases, she's seen just one person standing up in their community can make a complete difference and get the ball rolling with the, getting out ahead of this, understanding your flood risk, your wind risk, all of these things. So you can check out this podcast. Again, it's the GeoTrek podcast, GEOTREK. It's a top podcast on natural disasters. And you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can listen to it while you're driving around in your car. I think you'll really enjoy the discussion. It's very applicable with the upcoming hurricane season.
I completely agree. I think you'll enjoy the conversations. They're always good, no matter where you are and what you're doing. So thanks, Hal, for being part of that and for being part of this. We appreciate that so much.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
I've got one question, and then we'll get on to. I know, Bill, you got a bunch more you want to ask as well. But let me ask you guys this: we've had two instances outside of hurricane season when local government officials have taken the reasonable worst case scenario and published on social media that this is what's expected. And sometimes beyond the reasonable worst case scenario, and they call it expected. We had that. It happened yesterday when the SPC had a small portion of our viewing area under a marginal risk for severe weather, and a town at a far other end of the viewing area posted, "We're expecting severe thunderstorms tomorrow." And I worry about once we get to hurricane season, how that will translate. Do you guys see that at all? Do you see official entities? I'm not saying they're misreading, but they're taking what maybe could happen and saying, we expect this. I don't know, Rob, you seeing that?
I think a little bit to a degree, but I think, the emergency preparedness community wants to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best type of thing. So I haven't seen that too much. Usually they're pretty much here locally in line with the National Hurricane Center, coordinating with the National Weather Service. And then I get calls too from parish presidents, instead of counties, we have parishes here, and give them the lowdown because they always want to know, well, Rob, what do you think? We got all this information. I said,
what do you really think?
Yeah. I say, buy me a drink first, and then I'll have loose lips. But that almost always happens. I have 10 calls on the phone before my day even starts. So, Rob, what do you think? When people like to know that they have Rob's number, and let me call. I'm calling Rob. He's going to tell us what's up, that type of thing. So
I don't need the advocate yourself.
But I would say our local emergency preparedness folks, they're so experienced. They know what they need to do, and they do want to prepare for worst case scenario in preparation of, we're probably beyond the 95% confidence, statistical confidence profile, maybe in a few avenues, but I really see them playing it straight down the line and doing what's best for the community for sure.
So, Mike, you got a thought on that? And I think at hurricane season they do a much better feel for what we have on a general thunderstorm thing. But Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Tim, I've had it made a habit every hurricane season. I go out to the communities that were affected. Did it last year, did the year before, or the year before that, and I make a habit to visit officials, to talk to officials, to visit emergency management operation centers, and ask them, where did they get their information? Where did they get their weather information? Where did they get their forecast information? And I'm always floored by the diversity of their answers and their responses. Oftentimes it is the local TV broadcaster, but oftentimes it's some YouTube storm chaser that they follow, they really like. Somebody that I've never heard of. And, I live in this world to some extent. And so that is a little nerve-wracking when people are getting their... We use social media as a sort of big umbrella, but there are different places, right, that people can go. They can go to YouTube, they can go to Twitter or X now, they can go to TikTok or Instagram. But even then, where within those platforms are they getting their information? And it just varies so much. And so you see I can vividly remember after Hurricane Ian talking to one of the officials down there, and they were just telling me how the entire time they were getting their information from a storm chaser that I had never heard of. And I don't know, maybe that storm chaser was putting out good information, but I don't know. If I've not heard of him, it does make me a little worried about it.
What about you, Chris? You seeing anything like that?
No, I'd have to agree more with Rob that our officials are really good at trying to stay as calm as possible and at least presenting the worst case scenario information as this is the worst case scenario. Most of our officials have done this time after time after time. Most of our folks here are born and raised, so they've experienced this from childhood. They know not to get hysterical. We always have someone with the weather service kind of embedded with our city or parish leaders during these events, so they are getting the information from a trusted source. They are on calls with the Hurricane Center. What Mike has said is interesting, because I would like to go back, and that's something I never thought of, is after a storm asking some of these officials, where were you getting your information from? I'm guessing that most of them will say the local media and Weather Service Hurricane Center, but I am interested to see if some of them do follow, because when we're under the gun in Francine and certainly in other hurricanes, you will get some of these storm chasers to come down, and they are posting some sensational video, and it tends to be someone that I've never heard of either, but the video, boy, it really looks good. And then so someone will come in from news after we've seen this video on YouTube and will ask me about it, and I'll say, yeah, it looks great, but I don't know who that guy is, so I don't know if the video can be trusted. And I guess we're a little bit more on edge with just trusting any video that you see come across YouTube now. And I think even I would hope that most of our officials are a little bit warier and a little bit more hands off on some of the video before just jumping on with what may look sensationalized or may look sensational, I should say, not necessarily sensationalized, but kind of tread lightly with using that as, hey, we're getting footage from some unknown storm chaser that just came in town that he is saying cities X, Y, and Z are now flooding. So I think our officials do use trusted sources.
Good. I feel like we're standing around a table in the Miller Bar having this conversation. I like that a lot. Now it's the Miller Coffee Bar, I guess, this morning. That's the hospitality suite at the conference. Bill, jump back in. You got some more questions you want to ask him.
Well, I love this topic. Just a little history. When I got into this business, the average error for a 24-hour forecast track on a hurricane was 125 miles, and there was no scale at all at the intensity forecast. They basically trended it. If it was trending up, they'd keep trending it up a little bit, nudge it, not big time. So the training that went on for local officials was the expectation that they better plan for at least a category higher storm that's going to be there. Nowadays, I think the skill has reached the point that we probably don't need to do that. I actually like Ed Petrovsky's here's the most likely case, here's a reasonable worst case, and here's a reasonable best case for us here as a great approach to getting that across. I wonder about how we're going to train a lot of people coming forward on that, because obviously FEMA's being decimated. And I have a feeling a lot of those courses will be, they just won't have the resources to do them and whatnot. Maybe what I'm seeing over here is a lot of states, and in Texas too, that they're staffing up people in the state emergency management. They're staffing up with meteorologists. In the city of Houston, But while it doesn't have its own meteorologist, they have a flood control district that has staff meteorologists. So, and they all coordinate very well with the Weather Service. And I think that helps for the official world of getting everyone on the same page to avoid the confusion.
Hey, Bill, I was talking to Kevin Guthrie in Florida, the director of emergency management in Florida, a few weeks ago, and he was telling me they're up to 4 meteorologists on staff at the state EOC now. And then 1 Weather Service meteorologist from the Weather Service office in Tallahassee is also embedded at the state. So they have quite an army of meteorologists now there.
Oh, that's good. I mean, just from my perspective, when I was running the Houston office, it was challenging enough to brief all the local entities, but the state people would want a briefing because they didn't have a meteorologist. So you'd have to get familiar with a lot of weather that's going to happen outside of your own area of responsibility. And I think this really helps keep the focus doing it that way. Okay. Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on your point about the scaling up of storms and how we've sort of written our response plans, hurricane response plans. When I was with FEMA, that was my role, was to oversee all of their response and recovery plans. And one of the big things that we did after Hurricane Michael was we realized, and I think this is something that I know Ken hits on a lot, is that most of these really catastrophic Cat 5 hurricanes that have hit, maybe even all of them, just 2 or 3 days before they made landfall, were basically tropical depressions, tropical storms. So the timeline, that 2 or 3 day window to do all of the stuff that needs to get done, is a really short window. And a lot of the plans are considering that you're going to have 4, 5, 6 days to plan for a catastrophic hurricane, when the reality of it is it doesn't always work that way. So a lot of the plans had to be rewritten to make sure that we could do what needed to be done to get the stuff to where people needed to have them, and to have the teams deployed where they needed to be, in these really short windows.
Yeah, that's really that leads right into some of the stuff I wanted to show. Hey, Alex, can I share my screen?
Yeah, she can do that.
Okay. To your point, this is all the major landfalls since 2017, and all of these underwent rapid intensification in the Gulf, with the exception of Irma, which was a long track major hurricane. And it's these places that think they need 4 and 5 days to pull it off. The reality is, most of the time on the Gulf storms, you're not going to have it. With rapid intensification, I think it's been there more often than people give credit for. We just had a long lull of Gulf storms that didn't give us that opportunity. How do you guys handle a rapid intensification as far as ratcheting up the coverage and what's going on?
I think our viewers are now all too familiar with the term rapid intensification. And Good. I feel as though, because this is kind of front and center in the recent hurricane seasons, it's almost expected by our officials that is a very high probability of occurrence, to where now we are, as you were saying, kind of preparing for a category higher than what may be the initial forecast, or even a day out. We may still be looking at that possibility. And something that has been discussed, and I've been in numerous meetings and discussions with city and parish state officials, that the concept of contraflow, where we reverse lanes of the interstate to get people out, you need 3 days to completely enact the process of contraflow. And it's looking less and less likely that will be an option in hurricane season going forward, because there just won't be enough time to prepare and get all those, the monster of rerouting interstate systems, as well as coordinating with our surrounding states. We have to coordinate with Texas and Mississippi when we do that, and they're not always on board with that process. So it's looking, just from what I've gathered speaking to officials, that contraflow probably won't be in the future of getting people out of South Louisiana. I don't know if Rob has heard kind of the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. Because we after Hurricane Andrew, they started messing around with that, and the problem is there's just so many off-on ramps. You don't have enough police protection or an official to make sure the road stays blocked, and that's the thing that we're talking about for the Gulf of Mexico. I think that's one of the greatest risks we have is the lack of time for preparation. 2 or 3 days. I just got through a forensic case where drill ship offshore. Their hurricane plan was a 7-day plan. They did not have a plan for a 2 or 3 day situation. And this was a Hurricane Ida case where the ship wound up getting hit double whammied by the eye wall and had a couple of 80, 90-foot waves. And it comes down to foreseeability, yes, but also having a 2 to 3 day plan is the most important thing, because as Bill just laid out, look at all those storms, 40, anywhere between 36 to 60 hours ahead of time. They were either tropical disturbances, depressions, or barely a tropical storm, and they all made landfalls as these 4s and 5. And the forecasts are getting better too from the NHC. We're seeing when they're coming out with the initial bulletins, hey, they're going for a 2 on day 5 already. So this is or day 3 or 4. So we know that we could see these rapid intensifications. So we're getting there, but communicating to whether it's an oil company or whether it's a big manufacturing company, get a 2 or 3 day plan, 2-day plan, minimally 3 day if you have that luxury, because you're not going to get 5 or 7 generally, unless we're tracking something that's been ripping through the Caribbean and then making landfall here.
That's something we stress too, that 2 to 3 day window is sometimes all you may get. As good as our forecasts have gotten, the intensity we all know that is still needing some tweaking. And so we have, and I really do think that our viewers have come to that in just the last decade, maybe not quite as far back as Katrina, but certainly in recent time, where we're almost expecting that rapid intensification is very possible, and you may only have something like Rob said. It may be a luxury to have 3 days. We're more of a 2-day window sometimes.
Guys, how much of this do you think is just framing it? Like if your house was on fire, you'd be happy to run out with your life, right? And you have a 2-minute warning, right? But then somehow with tropical, we're thinking, well, we should have 4 days, 5 days. I was in Chipiona, Spain. It's the only tsunami-ready city in Spain. He said, you're talking 2-3 days to evacuate your city? He said, if there's an earthquake off the coast, we have 1 hour till the tsunami hits. So they looked at 2 days like a complete luxury. How much of this is just framing this to get people, like the most important thing is saving your life and getting out quickly?
That's a good point. And it's cultural around here too, man. Folks see a hurricane coming 2 or 3 daaya. They want to make a pot of jambalaya. They want to go out, get whatever they need to be at home for a few days. But I used to be like the emergency preparedness guys, flee from the water, not from the wind, right? But with the propensity of these storms, these 4 or 5s that we're seeing with rapid intensifications, I want to get people out of the way of that 30, 40, 50 mile wide diameter eye and eye wall, and really discuss. If you're thinking about evacuation, tomorrow's going to be the day to do it, and it's hard to transmit that without getting people too nervous. But I certainly say that this is a storm that you may want to think about getting out of town for, and not just driving up to Opelousas 20 miles north. It's like, go to Shreveport, go to Dallas. I tell people, there's always hotel rooms in Dallas, but it's also an expensive proposition for people to get up and go. I mean, the whole stat was you had to evacuate 3 times for every 1 hit. And that gets quite taxing, especially in the years that we've had back-to-back storms like Katrina, Rita, or Ike and Gustav, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we'll give a map of where we think you should go. People were surprised for Ida that I was saying, no, you're fine if you're going to Destin. Wait, I can evacuate to the coast. And I said, well, the coast, that's not where we're expecting the worst. So, and that's where I sent my family. And almost to build on what Rob was talking about, folks will say, what should I do? And I always feel I can't tell anybody what they should do, but I will be glad to tell you what I am doing. And for those storms, I said at one point, it was, we're preparing my family to stay at home and just a few days of probably no power. Thankfully, we now have a generator, and so that shouldn't be much of an issue. But when we were getting a little bit closer, I said, what I'm doing is I've already told my wife and kids to leave. And so take that what you will. I can't tell you what you should do. And everyone, I mean, South Louisiana, while our geography may not be dramatic, there are some places that are a little bit better off than others, obviously near the coast, lower lying areas, the North Shore, you're on higher ground. You should be safe from most of the water, especially farther north. But certainly the wind would be an issue then. So I can't tell people specifically what they should and shouldn't do unless they're already under evacuation orders. Sure. But I will gladly tell them what I'm advising my family. I'm from here. Almost my entire family is still here. And so that is what I'm telling my family to do. And I think people take that maybe a little bit more seriously when I'm saying that I'm sending my parents, my brothers, their families, and my own family out.
Thanks, Chris. Michael, what kind of insights or guidance do you provide people with the challenges of evacuating South Florida?
Well, it's South Florida. It's interesting because it's a little different than coastal Louisiana in terms of the storm surge threat. So you don't need to go in Southeast Florida, at least. You don't need to go that far to be in a safe place. And so, actually, I advise people to not go, hundreds of miles if they don't need to go. Is to have the plan in place ahead of the season to have a spot that you're sheltered from the wind, but you're safe. And I think that's kind of the main point in South Florida is that we don't want to unnecessarily clog the roads, and the people that do need to evacuate can't get to where they need to go when you might just need to go a few miles inland.
This came up in Ian, they were telling people you don't need to go to Tallahassee, you don't need to go to Atlanta, right? Just getting out of that surge zone, maybe even 20 miles could make the difference between life and death.
Yeah, and like I said, it's different for us. I mean, if you go to the Gulf Coast of Florida, if you go Southwest Louisiana, you can have a surge event that goes 50 miles inland, and that's problematic. I mean, you saw it during the 2005 hurricane season. Not that we can't get a significant storm surge, but there's a big difference between a surge that goes a few miles inland versus one that goes tens of miles inland.
It sure is. We ran the same parameters of Ike in the West Palm Beach and got a 7-foot surge instead of 17. That big a difference. Yep. Speaking of surge, since you were part and parcel of the storm surge unit when we were ramping up the storm surge warning and better information on it, a lot of those storms that we showed in the Gulf produced tremendous storm surges, yet the loss of life was relatively minor. Now, do you think the improved capability to communicate the threat through the warnings and the products play a role in that, or are people getting the message?
I hope so. I hope so, Bill. I don't think there's a way of knowing that for sure, but I think that people have definitely become savvier with understanding the surge threat, either through just a barrage of information and the way we message it, or the new products and the new forecasts that come from the Hurricane Center. I've been really encouraged to see a number of additions that they have made, the Hurricane Center has made to their public forecast. Like last hurricane season with Hurricane Helene, they were really hitting on the size of the hurricane. So it's not just the track and the intensity and sort of the standard things that we're all used to, but making a point that every hurricane is built differently, and that these bigger hurricanes can sweep more water along the coast. And they were talking, the Hurricane Center forecasters were talking about that a lot in their discussions. I was really hitting that on air a lot about how the storm, even though it was going to stay offshore, was still going to be a significant storm surge producer for the west coast of Florida. And, St. Pete saw their worst storm surge that most people had seen in their memory from that.
Yep. How about Louisiana?
I am absolutely in love with the inland warnings now. That is huge. I mean, obviously being in coastal Louisiana, not as much, but it's just, I wish that had been something done years ago, because I am absolutely in love with that product now.
Yeah, and I just think all of the new products come from the NHC. I mean, in the '05 season, I got Katrina behind me just in case anybody want to know. But the 21 days after Katrina, we had Rita, and we had no guidance on what the storm surge was going to be. The storm is coming around the periphery. I mean, it's going to be a big storm. It went Cat 5. So we knew it was going to have a big surge. So people want to know what kind of surge we didn't have guidance until the day before. So, but I was saying, I'm thinking it's going to be 10 to 15 feet, maybe more. And sure enough, we not only had 10 or 15 feet, but as Michael alluded to, penetrated north of Lake Charles. So the average penetration of that storm surge was 15 miles inland from Lake Charles all the way past Morgan City. And if you may remember, it re-inundated New Orleans with more water after Katrina. So, and then 3 years later, we have Ike, and Ike was a different beast. Even though it hit further up toward the Texas coast, it still produced a similar surge. In fact, it was higher across our entire viewing area, but it was slower to occur. There was not a lot of wave action and a lot of current like what we saw with Rita, but Rita made the coast more porous, so the next storm surge now penetrates farther inland. And these new storm surge products, it puts storm surge back on the map. We need to think about that as well. And most people are getting out. There are a couple of harrowing stories that we had from especially Hurricane Rita, where people stuck it out and they were getting 9-10 foot waves in their first floor of their home, and luckily they had a second floor. But those products, I think, have already saved lives and will save more in the future.
Let me jump in. We've got a couple of online questions we need to get to before the end of the program. I want to this could go on all day, but Alex, pull up that first question we can ask, and I'll go ahead and read it. This is from Casper, and this is for Mike. What's been the influencing factors with the recent behavior of the Mad Julian Oscillation? Seem to struggle to get out of the Pacific, Mr. Lowry.
Yeah, no, it has. It's interesting because the MJO was looking like it would make it around to the Atlantic, and it's weakening right now. There's obviously there are factors at play in terms of the sea surface temperatures and why it's stuck where it is. The MJO always moves around, though. It comes around. It's just weaker than it was, and so I think the influence on the Caribbean and the Gulf are going to be more muted than the models we're seeing a few weeks ago. So hopefully keep that storm activity down for a little bit longer on the Atlantic side, but as we know, just give it a few more weeks, things will perk up.
Terrific. We have one other question. I believe this one is for Rob. This is also from Casper. With all the endless drama surrounding what to call the Gulf, can you offer some of your insight on how you reduce the conflict that exists? Let's take it from there.
I'm so screwed with that. Because you're talking about. I've talked about the Gulf of Mexico. I'm 64 years old. It's always been the Gulf of Mexico to me for the last 50 years. So, it's already slipped out a few times, and I've corrected myself. Said Gulf of America, and then the firestorm from both sides of the equation comes at me. Phone calls to social media. Stop following you because you called it Gulf of America. I've stopped following you because you called it the Gulf of Mexico. So I know I'm going to put a tip jar in the back here. Every time I say Gulf of Mexico, I'm putting $5 in, and we'll see how much money we have at the end of the season. But I think I'm going to throw a pretty big damn party. I think I'm going to throw a big party, but because it just rolls out of the mouth so easily. So I might say Gulf of Mexico and then just say, and this Gulf moisture, and not even acknowledge my error. And we even had a promo that we started running again from last hurricane season. I've been studying the Gulf of Mexico for 40 years. It's like, no, we got to take that out of the promo. So they just cut it out.
Over here, the tendency, it seems like most people, long before the controversy, just refer to it as the Gulf.
Right.
More likely pronounced the Guff. The Guff. But it's now hurricane season, and given our history, we should call it the Gulf of Rapid Intensification.
The GORI, we'll call that. Hey, it's been a great show today, guys. I want to stay with the Millibar theme that we've been going with today, and we'll make it last call. Give everybody a chance to put your comments in. I'll start with Chris. Any thoughts you want to leave us with as we wrap up the program today?
I think something that we've discussed throughout the program here is we treat each hurricane season differently. We kind of prepare the same whether or not that seasonal forecast is calling for hyperactive, slightly above average, average below average. One thing that we've always stressed is we need to prepare exactly the same for the season as a whole. But then as we get storm by storm, each is different. So just because my Papa's house didn't flood in this storm doesn't mean it's not going to flood in that storm. So we take each season preparedness the same, but treat each storm differently.
Rob Perillo, what you got?
Well, we do the hurricane special and Hurricane Week, the last week of May. We do all this prep for the season, but the prime of the season doesn't start until, say, mid-August. So what we're planning to do, and we've done this in the past as well, is re-air those stories first week, second week of August, so it's fresher in people's minds because we know it's going to go downhill. And this season, I would say, compared to last season, maybe is equally as busy in the Caribbean and the Gulf, but maybe a little bit more August action. It was kind of a weird year last year where those troughs coming off the African coast were so far to the north. We'll see if they're and, everybody's talking about, well, the main development region is not as hot, but it's still warmer than normal. And the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean is still hotter than normal. And it depends on the depth of that heat as we move forward. But expect a busy year. We'll be talking about storms. Let's hope and pray one doesn't come here, but be prepared for one.
Thanks, Rob. Michael Lowry.
We don't know what we don't know, which I think is what keeps us in the game. And we're going to probably be sitting here 6 months from now talking about something that none of us could have seen, good or bad. And, just that's something to keep in mind, and why you need to just keep in tune to the forecast throughout the hurricane season. Chris's point about every storm being unique, I mean, that is spot on. Talking to all of these people who had been hit by the recent storms, and never once heard someone say, Helene was just like this storm. No one ever does. Katrina was Katrina. Mm-hmm. Helene was Helene. Ian was Ian. And so, take every storm as its own unique entity and prepare for it accordingly.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Hurricane Hal,
Oh, hey, in light of all the rapid intensification we've seen in recent years, I love the conversation about having a 2 to 3 day plan. I think it's an action item that people can take like right now to be better prepared this season.
Bill Reed, what you got for us?
Oh, yeah. My main takeaway is you three guys have shown me that the markets you serve are in good hands. I love listening to all the great work you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Rob Perillo, KTC, Lafayette, Louisiana. Chris Franklin, WWL in New Orleans. Michael Lowry, WPLG in Miami. Hurricane Hal, Bill Reed. Guys, thank you. Great program today. Thanks to Alex from back in the control room for making it happen. Thank our sponsors who make this happen. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Live View. Next week, Dr. Renato Molina is going to talk about climate change and hurricane intensity. We'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, thanks for being with us on NTWC Plus. Take care.